I think the first question we're going to have here is kind of for the whole panel. And this is sort of to ask, how do you think we can, I know several of you brought it up in your presentations in different ways, but I mean, if you're looking for some sort of positive environmental outcomes, how can the water-energy-food nexus be used to push policy towards positive environmental outcomes? Or does it exist maybe in your minds as just a value-neutral tool which doesn't need to push towards environmental outcomes? Answer that way, so. Who'd like to answer first?
I could start if you want.
Excellent.
I think really the Nexus can can provide a lot of help to improve the environment, since many of the environmental pressures we have now are a consequence of interlinkages of these systems. I'm thinking, for example, about water pollution in certain areas due to urban discharges, and when these discharges could be stopped by advanced water treatment, that could be constrained by the high energy cost that this could entail. So if the problems that are crossed between the three sectors are sorted out, this can entail important environmental positive effects. So how to do it? I think it's a matter of first identifying where the problems are, and then trying to find the synergies or balance the possible solutions in order to be able to solve these problems.
Who'd like to go next?
I can try
Yes.
this question next. So this is a very interesting and very important question, and I think the entire idea of the Nexus is to reduce those negative impacts, negative externalities between the sectors. And as a matter of fact, there are ways we can not only reduce but also turn those trade-offs, environmental effects, into something positive, synergies. For example, I'll give you one case study example. What we did research together with colleagues from International Food Policy Research Institute in Bhutan. There are a lot of sloping areas forested, but then households, poor communities who don't have access to energy, they cut down the trees, and they cut the trees to use it for their energy needs and other needs. As a result, it creates, as I told in my presentation, some soil erosion problems, and then it leads to the siltation of the reservoir downstream. What the company, hydro energy company, is doing, it's an international company, it's providing some funding to government so that government could spend on extension and dissemination of sustainable land management technologies among the farmers. So how to sustainably manage the forest, how to decrease deforestation, how to increase the use of agriculture, and how to get access to energy from other means. As a result, it's not only it's cheaper for the company it's a cheaper way to reduce soil erosion and deforestation. They don't lose out on their energy production side, but at the same time it contributes to socio-economic development of the communities who live upstream. So I will send a link to Scott to that publication, and he can. I hope he can put it online so that if anyone interested could access that. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Does anyone else want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is knowledge gap, where do we need nexus, when do we need nexus? Because always following a nexus approach may not be beneficial. Yeah, it entails a cost to follow that kind of approach. And if we follow a nexus solution, which could be technological solution, institutional solutions, how it can reduce the risk or reduce the threat to human water security or to environment. Do we know all these answers, or when we don't know, because the nexus is water energy food nexus is so broad, and how we can connect, as we have discussed also, the different scales, because the nexus solutions we are getting at a local scale, whether it makes a difference if you multiply that solutions, whether it makes a difference at a global scale, or we will not violate that boundary, as I was talking. So so we have to go beyond that buzzword and do our proper nexus accounting, and then we come out with solutions with whether that really addresses those nexus problems. And when the solutions, when have to do an impact assessment, really, we can save some resources. And the thing never ends there. If we save some resources, how we are using that saved resources, because it's not only one sector, it's multiple sectors. The challenge is multiple fold. So there are many things to be researched on. And as I said, the challenge was thrown to the scientists, to the research community also, and they cannot just only produce the knowledge, it should be co-produced with industry, with other different stakeholders. Because if you see in a corporate, in an industry, particular industry, they have also done very successfully, they have practiced nexus principles. We can also learn from their examples. So I think it's very, very broad, and sometimes it's good, but sometimes it's very challenging.
Excellent. Thank you. Maksud, would you like to weigh in, or let me go to the next question? Okay. We've had a couple of questions come in regarding the future. So one from Branko Vusiak asks that climate change is one of the major drivers of change, and he asks if there's any recent studies specifying world areas where intensive reservoir construction is needed to mitigate effects of climate change, including extreme precipitation and floods or droughts. Similarly, we've had another question from Samir Saifa asking if there are any nexus studies going out further in the future, perhaps as far as 2050. So anyone can kind of respond to either parts of those about studies that they have seen or know about, or sort of how you see your own work, your own case studies that far out.
With this multiple scenarios, there is one project which is going at International Institute of Applied System Analysis, which is called IASA, which is Water Future and Solutions, which is looking for the next 80 years, and Sustainable Water Future program is closely working with IASA in developing those scenarios, and where we are taking into multiple sectors resource use efficiencies, and finding this kind of a trade-offs at a regional and the global scale. Yes. Another question was on climate change, right? Climate change and nexus, or climate change and reservoirs. There are a couple of studies and which we can suggest, already done from GWSP perspectives, and because in the climate change, how humans are impacting the global hydrological cycles, which proceedings of National Academy of the PNS was published in Science. There has been kind of we initiated a debate dialogues a couple of months back on this climate change and reservoir issues, whether it's at the local scale or the global scales, and what kind of infrastructures we need. So but I could not get the first question properly. Yeah, I thought it's a little bit broad.
Does anyone else want to weigh in, or should we go to the next question?
I would just like to add.
So I may add shortly little bit.
Okay.
Can
let's have Beatriz go first, and then
okay.
Maksud, you can go.
On the first question on areas where hydropower development is expected, I think a study that could be useful to look at is the World Water Program assessment of 2014. They made a broad assessment of the main trade-offs fields of conflict across all the regions. And there are specifications on hydropower in this report, so it could be a good source to look at.
Maksud, did you want to?
Yeah. Actually, regarding the interrelationship between climate change and also this hydropower production, there is a large debate actually. There are also both proponents and also opponents of this constructing large dams for hydropower production. So the main argument of this, proponents who support the construction of large dams, they think that if you construct large dams, there will be more hydropower, so industry develops and it will be good for economic development. But meantime, there are a lot of opponents. They say that it has a lot of ecosystem, negative environmental impact. For example, especially in the case of the RLC basin, for example, if you construct some large dams to expand the volume of this large dams, at first it will change the water release regime, and consequently it will destroy the downstream irrigation systems. Actually, it will reduce the downstream irrigation availability and also these downstream ecosystems. So it is only one environmental impact. But meantime, these proponents also argue that, for example, there are different options of energy production. For example, if you use the gas or thermal or some other fossil fuel-based energy production, it will produce more CO2 or carbon emissions. But if you produce hydropower, it has less carbon emissions. So that's why it's beneficial for environment. But if you look at actually, again, there are some other studies are coming, and they are also comparing these environmental impacts of different renewable energy production options, and they are saying kind of, for example, solar and wind production technologies has little or less environmental impact than this hydropower production dams. And also the cost of implementing or adopting this solar or wind energy production technologies are getting cheaper than constructing some large dams. And there are several studies also about the investment costs of these large dams actually. And if you see initially planned investment costs are much lower than the real actual cost of these large dams. And in many studies actually, I mean the technical studies, they reduce these investment costs and also underestimate the environmental impact and just to support the construction of the large dams. Thanks much.
Excellent, thank you, thank you. Our next question comes from Rhea Stefan, who asks, what principles for water policies and laws need to be changed in view of considerations for the Nexus? What reforms need to happen in the water management frameworks so that they reflect and consider the Nexus? Who'd like to go first?
Okay, I just want to extend it and also connect it with this question. When we are talking of the dams, because dams also inhibit the flow of nutrients and sediments and impact the water cycle by increasing the water residence time and affecting various ecosystem and services. So when we are talking of these water policies and nexus, it should not be only limited to different sectors, because this is a big ecosystem perspective is there. So when ecosystem-centric nexus of, I think if you put it, it opened up several policy challenges. We already had IWRM, we know the limitations of IWRM. And the nexus policies, we cannot have only one resource-centric policies there, because it is very difficult, it will be very, very difficult to implement, as I want to say. Nexus water policies as we had in IWRM, because there are so many informal irrigation systems which are difficult to manage, and you cannot have one kind of a that way on a holistic view on that. And forget about when this is nexus is like you are combining several sectors, and you're combining, you're taking if you take a broader view, it is a very, I will say, if one sector approach, but definitely is open up in if you say the energy subsidies which goes on for groundwater irrigation or so, and how it affects the topsoil. And as Alisher was explaining in other parts, it also happens in in India and so in Pakistan also. And there, these policies, one particular policies, I'm saying not one sector policies, but these policies should take into account the effects in the other sectors, and it needs more coordinations, governance challenges, and it will not come free. It will come at a transaction cost. So we have to see what are the effects and what are the costs and compare those things. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Would anyone else like to comment? And a similar question has come in, also asking just about relationships of power between different decision makers. So if anyone would like to include power and decision makers sort of as part of their response to how laws and water governance need to reflect the nexus, that would be great. Anybody like to comment?
Maybe I will give a broad comment. Maybe not. I myself mostly work on at the household microeconomic level, so my comments, response would also come from that perspective. Not in terms of water policies or other nexus policies, when we talk about this at household level, as we see, there may be a lot of negative impacts, externalities like soil degradation, poor farmers not taking good care of soils and then leading to soil erosion, and then less river siltation and other things. So standard approaches to policy and standard economics approaches would call for using the principle of polluter pays. So there need to be some policies which would try to make that those who do this damage, negative externalities, will try to incorporate, internalize those costs. So this is the one. This could be one policy, but in many cases, if we are talking about about poor households, poor farming households, poor communities, such policies may not lead to positive outcomes because they're already poor, and internalizing the costs of these negative externalities, nexus externalities to them will create other, maybe even more important problems. So another approach to such policies, nexus policies, would be through incentives, providing incentives, providing subsidies, or providing some kind of enabling, incentivizing regulatory frameworks which allow farmers like access to credit, access to markets, which allow farmers to households to have and within the nexus to create less this kind of negative externalities. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, thank you. Did anyone else want to weigh in on that?
I was just thinking that yeah, go ahead.
Beatriz, you can go ahead. You're speaking first.
Yes. Well, just thinking that the point is not letting power spoil all the efforts sometimes, in the sense that in many cases, and in Spain we have many examples, for example, policies are changing depending on who or which party is in the power and what sometimes interests it has. And for example, water is being used as a political harm in a way, because it can, depending on the interests of regional parts, can grant votes for the political parties to maybe support a certain measure or support some other measure. And the same happens with energy. And sometimes energy policies are more lead to political interests than real to what would be best for the region itself, or to looking at what implications it can have to the other sectors. So I think that is an important thing that has to be dealt with, and that can be a constraint to really applying a nexus approach.
Okay, who was speaking? Was it at the same time?
Oh, yeah, me.
Okay.
Oh, me.
Yeah, go for it.
So one is, talking of the power, I think political economy plays a very strong role, because whether we are, suppose if we take this subsidy, electric subsidy for groundwater irrigation, or dams where there is always a trade-off where hydropower and agriculture trade-off comes in. So it depends on whether a political party is, how long there is a chance for him to remain in power. Because if it is in a very in a stable political system, you will see most of the investments are going for dams. Or, but if the political system is quite volatile, then it goes for subsidies, so that the benefit reaches to the electorates very quickly, and so that he can come back to power. So politics, power plays a very big role in formulating such kind of policies, and it has different effects on other sectors, the policies which are framed in one sector on other sectors, which I want to say.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we're really about out of time here. Did anyone else want to give us their thoughts on this last question?
Just a small comment regarding this, how to say, power relationships. So actually, Anik already did a lot of work, but I don't know why he didn't mention about it. Actually, this power issue is much more related to about this water allocation and water sharing at the basin scale. So we all know that most of the river basins are mainly shared by 2 or 3 countries, and definitely they have different interests and also different power depending on the location along the river, and also depending on their economy. So actually studies in this area is mainly looking at what can be the benefits from the cooperation, and then they are comparing this cooperation benefits with the non-cooperation, or with different coalitions among these countries in the river basin. So based on these estimations, they are just showing how these countries, or it doesn't matter how much power they have, but they are just simply showing kind of how they can benefit from this cooperation. And then they are delivering this information and then they are just simply suggesting. So this kind of information can be important, I think, for making decision about this integrated management of both this water, food, and the energy systems. And definitely, surely, there should be also transaction cost of this cooperation should be incorporated in these assessments. Maybe Anik can add some, I don't know, because he has a lot of study about this transboundary water management and how this power influence on the benefit sharing and water or energy resource sharing.
Yes.
Did you want to add a little something there, Anik, or?
No, it's fine. Yeah, I think Maksud is quite right that much of this policy framing, as I said, whether it's transboundary water sharing or policy framing and different subsidies and all these things are dictated, as I said, by the political economy and the volatility in the political system and the structure, obviously, the structure.
Well, this about wraps up our webinar today. If everyone on the panel would like to give just a final closing thought, anything that maybe they'd like to drive home, a parting idea for our listeners, or just any connections perhaps they've made tonight in talking, we'll go in the same order that you presented in. So we'll start with Anik.
Yeah, I think we should move out of this Nexus buzzword and go and kind of implement Nexus solutions, both technological and institutionals, and co-producing these solutions with different stakeholders from civil society to industries and with households and so on. And yeah, time to act on Nexus.
Excellent. Beatriz?
I think my conclusion or final conclusion is that we are on the positive way. I mean, there is a lot of research going on studying all these trade-offs. A lot of solutions are being explored and applied, and I think in the coming years we can expect that this nexus can help improve environmental problems and resource management problems in the whole world.
Okay, excellent. Alisher?
Thank you very much, everybody, for attending this webinar. And one thing I would like to mention maybe at the end is what I already spoke about in my presentation, but I would like to highlight that, of course, Nexus, we talk about water, energy, food security, so different sectors. But what I would like to emphasize is Nexus is about, first, about people. So whatever, when we look at these trade-offs and synergies, the objective function, the purpose should be how we can improve people's lives, how we can reduce poverty, how we can improve their well-being, even if it means that some sector areas are under-optimized. But if we are maximizing human welfare, human well-being, reducing poverty, that perhaps Nexus would provide answers to how to manage in a way that these kind of actions have achieved most impact in terms of human welfare improvement with least impact on any other resource use. Thank you.
Excellent. And finally, Maksud?
Thanks much. What I see here is actually kind of my idea or opinion is mostly from the research perspective. So actually there we can see that a lot of economic benefits from this Nexus approach, what can be benefit from this cooperation or cooperation among different sectors, this kind of assessments we can see. But they should also, this research and studies also should focus more on, rather than only economic assessments, it would be much better if there are more studies just looking at what will be the, let's say, environmental benefits or health benefits of this Nexus approach, and also poverty reduction or income distribution effects of this analyzing or considering this Nexus approach in the modeling and other Nexus-based studies. Thanks much.
Well, excellent. I really appreciate the panel. I'd like to thank you one last time. So thank you, Professor Anik, Beatriz Rodríguez, Alisher Mirzabaev, and Maksud Bekchanov. Really found all of your insights so helpful. Really helped me reframe how I think about the water-energy-food nexus. And I hope that everyone who's listening and joined us for the webinar today found it just as fascinating as I did. It's given me personally a lot of material to think about in the next upcoming days. And so I hope that everyone out there listening has been generating a lot of creativity and thoughts about how you approach your own research and writing in your work. I'd like to remind everybody listening that this webinar is based on the special issue of IWRA's flagship journal, Water International. And for a limited time, all of these articles that came out of this special issue are now free. So please go to the Taylor and Francis website and download all the articles. You can enjoy them at your leisure later and interact and see what some of the research, read these articles more in depth and see where the research is going. And these subjects will also be part of our forthcoming policy briefs, which will be available hopefully soon on our website, www.iwra.org. To remind you again, this webinar was brought to you by the International Water Resources Association. We are an over 40-year-old nonprofit, non-governmental educational organization who bridges disciplines and geographies and connects professionals, students, individuals, and corporations and institutions who are concerned with sustainable use of water's resources. If you're interested in knowing more about the association or you want to become a member, you can go to www.iwra.org. We hope to have you at our next webinar in a few months, and it'd be great if you could join us then. So on behalf of IWRA and the Sustainable Water Futures Program, thank you very much for joining us today.